right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm on the wrong second. We'll get that taken care of in a second. Welcome to another episode of UAP Disclosure Tonight. I'm Thomas Fessel, your host, and we've got a special show tonight with someone who's been involved in the phenomena from a deep dive in a particular, if you want to call it, research aspect of it, Donderi. Hopefully I said that right, Don. I'm bad with names. I'm from the Midwest. But it's looking like it's going to be a great show talking about truth, lies, and ETs. It should be a good one. So without any further ado, let's take a look and see who's in the chat room and say welcome to everybody. Let's go to the top. The real Bob Gray. Great to have you here, Bob. Sorry about the new colors. They changed them on me. Hey, look. Even I'm here. Hey, Bob. Linda, Jesse P., welcome to the show. Great to have you here. Linda Thomason, welcome to the show. Also great to have you here. You're an awesome co-producer, actually co-director more like it, for inviting Femnomena. Any of this wouldn't be the same without you, and I really value you as a friend and a collaborator. Thank you again for being here. Who else do we have on here? Let's see, Greg O'Brien. Hey, look, he's in the chat room, and he's in the backstage, so we'll have him coming on next. Alien Girl 111, welcome. Great to have you here. It looks like you've got a show later on today that I'm looking forward to watching. Can't wait. Just need to get a title screen up there for you. Need some help on that. Well, I can't do it all online, but willing to help you. It's about collaboration and making it great. Let's see who else is here. Julie Welchel. Welcome, Julie. Great to see you here, sister. It's absolutely awesome to have you here. UFO Story in Majestic. Great to have you here. It always chops off your name in this interface, so it's hard for me to see. I'm sorry about that. Elena Lonalu. Man, bad with names. Thank you for coming, Elena. We love having you here. Ethereal Aura, welcome. Hold on. I'm out of music, out of time, but I'm still not done. Welcome to everybody in the audience, and I think that I have at this point. On that note, let me just go ahead and throw in the basic loop in the background. Turn off of particle cancellation from that noise. Let me go ahead and bring in Rob. Welcome, my friend. How you doing?
How are you doing? I'm doing well.
Awesome. Great to have you here. Looking forward to today's show?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Have you had a good week so far?
All week.
Hopefully you've had a good week so far?
Going pretty good. A lot better than last week.
Yeah, nice.
Things are calming down.
Awesome. Good to hear. And we've got a repeat coming back on our panel again. None other than Greg O'Brien. Welcome, Greg.
Thomas, thank you so much, man. How are you?
Doing great, my friend. Looking forward to today's show.
Absolutely. How are you doing, Rob?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here.
We have a couple new people here. We have the, believe it or not, Obi-Wan Kenobi is here. Hey, Obi-Wan, do me a favor. Use the Force and click that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it so I can bring up the interface. I'm actually going to go ahead and take Obi-Wan, and you're now a moderator, so please click that subscribe button. I like to take care of everybody in our show. Without further ado, I'm going to bring on our guest. Turn this music down here completely. Actually, before I bring our guest on, what I actually want to go ahead and do, actually, I'll bring our guest in. Don, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
It's a great show. Now, I had first watched one of you, a broadcast of you on WFLD TV in Chicago about 3 or so weeks ago. And after I had seen that video, it was just like, wow, this guy is the first person that I've seen who really gets it and really understands the phenomena. And I mean, you talk about it. Tell you what, besides me just going ahead and describing it, I'm going to change my camera around here, hopefully. And I'm going to, if I can find, I don't want to do that. Here we go. I'm going to capture. Let me make sure I've got this in the right place. Sorry about this for a second. Let me make it a little bit larger. I know I should have done this ahead of time, but I didn't, so I apologize. Here we go. Let's go like that. Let's shrink, make it a little bit bigger this way. Come on. Get there. So this is a video clip of Don on WFLD TV in Chicago that I saw of him about 3 weeks ago. And after seeing this particular video clip, I was like, you know what? I need to talk to Don. He's an amazing person. He's got some, an amazing perspective on it that we just don't see a lot of time in the mainstream media. So let me make sure that's bringing down. I'm going to go ahead and play this video clip for everybody. Almost there. Okay, we got it. So without further ado, let me go ahead and pop everybody down on the bottom of the screen. And let's go ahead and roll the video.
Forget what you think you know about aliens and UFOs for a moment. Our next guest wants to convince you that extraterrestrials are absolutely real, for real, for real, for serious.
And he says a closer look at the government's UFO report shows real evidence. Let's bring in Dr. Donderi. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. You can tell by the introduction there, Terrence is a little bit skeptical on this whole thing. What do you want people to know?
I'm delighted to be here, back in the town where I came of age, because I grew up along the Midway, if you want to put it that way.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
And here we are talking about UFOs. And I recently wrote a book about them, as you probably know. Would you like me to summarize in 3 easy sentences?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Some of what people report as UFOs are actually extraterrestrial vehicles. Some of those vehicles have extraterrestrial crews, ETs, and some of those crews kidnap people to study us. That's it in 3 sentences. Now, there's obviously reams and reams of evidence about that, but that's the story in short form.
Okay, so you think it's just being kept quiet and kept secret from us, from the government? Like, why don't we know about this? Why haven't I met ET yet?
Well, you haven't read 75 years worth of books about the subject. People have been looking in the sky at what's going on since about 1947. And they've been writing it down, taking pictures, getting radars, recording it. You don't know just because it's not part of your school education. And basically, some of the evidence has been kept from us by the US government. A lot more has been collected by private people, published in private books, and has been available for the last 75 years. Nobody's looking, that's all. And nobody wants to, because the idea is frankly a bit frightening.
Well, to be fair, there's a lot that's not a part of our school education: Black history, economics, financing, stocks, but I digress. Anita?
All right. Well, talk to us about what officials know. Well, what are they telling us in this report? And, should people like Terrence take it seriously?
Well, first of all, they're telling you that what's been seen and publicized since about 2017 are US Navy pilots who are expert witnesses recording on their instruments, not just photographs, but radar, that we've been seeing things, they've been seeing things in the sky that don't work like people's machines. They go faster, they accelerate immediately, they stop and start instantaneously. They would smash us to the walls if people were inside those things. And even if people are not, we don't know how to make them. So that's the story. Since 2017, you've been getting government leaks and government officials telling you that what's going on is something that we don't know how to do. Therefore, somebody else knows how to do it, and it's not us.
We have only scratched the surface of this conversation, but we're getting a wrap. Doc, thank you. You've given me plenty to think about. I may start reading some of these reports.
There we go. So as you can see, let me take that video down, put myself back, put Don up on the top of our view here. Actually, I'm in the top view right now. Let me take myself out. And where am I? Take myself, move it around and bring Don up to the top, turn off the camera over here so you can see me again. And there we go. It's actually UAP disclosure night. There we go. So Don, you're definitely an amazing person. You've got, as Linda Thompson in our chat room has said, you're a brilliant psychologist, author, scientist, inventor, consultant. You're also an engineer. You're involved in so many different parts of the phenomena and everything. It's really, you're an amazing person to say the least.
Well, that's very kind. I appreciate that. I appreciate being invited. Basically, I've said it all in 3 minutes. And it's not literally that I've said it all, because I've written 2 books about it. But dealing with this in it's a very complex situation. It's been going on for years. I think the interest of your group is as much the fact that it seems to have been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, than that where I got in, which is over the last 75 years. My interest began because I was a professional in visual perception and memory. And what's the evidence? Well, the current evidence is what people see and remember and then write down and talk about. And that is not history. That's just current events. In my lifetime, starting in 47, but making the public aware since about 1965, because the first sets of information that started to come out in the 50s or the early mid 40s were basically studied by connoisseurs and dismissed by the government. In fact, the US government lied about them. So we've had a hard time getting our heads around this, but I think we do now. And what we are facing is you want to put it this way, existential problem for humanity, because we're in the presence of one or more technologically superior civilizations that are paying the same kind of attention to us that we pay to the other animals on this planet. And we don't always treat them nicely, put it plainly.
Yeah, that's true, because you hear about a lot of the different crashes and different things that potentially happened, and us taking, if you want to call it, possession of the occupants of the craft, whether they're alive or not. We're dissecting, putting this stuff through it. I mean, who is it? Uri Geller has talked about that. Werner von Braun took him back to a facility in NASA where they went 4 stories underground and to open up a door to a deep freezer where they saw frozen alien life forms. So we've had our hands in doing a bunch of different things, and it kind of, comes into the first section of your book, which is called Truth, and the truth we're actually dealing with.
Right, and I don't cover all of the truth because I only covered the part that I could.
Yeah,
I'm an academic, so if it's written down in a book and it's got citations, then I like it. If it's a story that Werner von Braun told Uri Geller, I'm a little less certain about it. But that's my prejudice, because basically, if you sit behind a desk and write and type books and talk to students, you've got to be very careful about your sources. And
Correct.
So I'm probably overcautious on that side. So I'm probably telling the world in what I write much less than what really is happening.
Right.
Because I'm only telling them what I can verify from some certified source. That's the only way you get an academic paper published.
I hear you.
Right.
Okay.
And now, at least with the, if you want to call it in your section of truth, we are, the U.S. government has given us a little nugget of information and said, yes, these things are real. We don't know where they're coming from, what they're doing, but they have, like you said before, properties of instantaneous acceleration, just appearing out of nowhere, no visual signs of propulsion on the craft, and they're just hanging in space and within our atmosphere, going from in the air down into the water, underwater, going in excess of 200 knots per 200 knots. And I think that the fastest we can go underwater is like 20 or 30 knots in our submarines. So it's kind of like, yeah, they have all these abilities that they have that just aren't there. But now that they've, if you want to call it, opened the door, now we can get real research, bring the scientists in, because I believe the work of Lou Elizondo, it's something that he actually wants to go ahead and help rip the, if you want to call it, the UFO situation out of the hands of the DOD and bring it into a more open area. And the biggest thing that's of interest with him, he's actually he's a contractor working for the federal government. So it's almost like as we have 2 different parts of the government fighting with each other out in the public to try and get this stuff out.
A tremendous amount has changed since 2017, when those videos were first released, and Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, got on videos through the New York Times. And now, to put it plainly, the S has hit the fan. I won't swear on television, but
we can. This is adults only.
But you can't go back now. Everybody knows about this stuff. It is no longer private or esoteric or for nerds only. It is for everybody, because it's been endorsed by every major form of medium. Video, New Yorker, New York Times. You can't do better than that. And it's here. We've got to live with it. We had to live with it anyway, but now it's got to be lived with politically and socially in a way that we didn't have to do it before. Frankly, before it was only a matter of nerds, academics, or crazy people who are interested in this stuff. Now everybody knows it's real. The academics are justified. the quote crazy people are justified, and here we are. We're moving on.
And it turns out the people with the tinfoil hats that I like to bring out every so often are the
Right.
people who have been talking the truth
Yes.
about the different stuff.
Yes.
And now we're transferring this tinfoil hat off to someone like Mick West, who's on Twitter and just wants to look at any potential sighting or different things and debunk it. And now here's one thing that's really concerning to me, and this would actually be from, your doctor in psychology kind of an area, is now he's going after the encounter survivors from the aerial school that was in Zimbabwe, where the UFOs came down and landed and they saw the people and they had these pictures that were put into their mind and the message that were there, from a psychological aspect. Isn't that, something when you don't have someone who's gone through so much trauma in their life, and now you have people who are trying to call them out as liars and debunk them, in social media aspects?
Listen, I'm reasonably close to that lot of thinking, because one of those people, a woman who's publicly known named Emily Trim, I've had dinner with, and my wife and I sat and had dinner with her and another Montreal ufologist a couple of years ago. She's whole, she's intelligent, she's a gifted artist, she's drawn and painted about her experiences.
Yeah.
And I believe her. I also met Selma Sadek, another woman who'd gone through this and is now living in America. Mm-hmm. So I know at least two of these people. They're not crazy. They're not deluded. They're not fools. They're intelligent, sympathetic human beings, period. And their experiences.
They didn't ask for this.
Pardon?
They didn't ask to witness what they did. They didn't ask to be scrutinized and drugged, for their entire lives out and criticized and doubted and treated like they're crazy. And you've got dozens of these kids that all corroborate each other's stories, and the skepticism and humility that goes with it. Why would anybody put themselves to that kind of ridicule if they didn't actually experience something like that?
Right on. Yeah. I agree.
So it's amazing. I didn't even know that you had actually met those people. So it kind of, it's a small interconnected world. But yeah, it's just, it's hard for anyone to talk about the experience. And again, this is talking about the truths, what they've gone through, what they've experienced, and knowing how Rob even looks at ancient stuff going back 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 plus years in history in that's been preserved in rock carvings and all different types of things. It's you have to just not look at what's happening today and say, I need a a 4K camera color feed. I need to have a infrared. I need to have this or that and all these different stuff in order for me to believe it. No, we have plenty of stuff, like you said, going back to Roswell 75 years ago, that those doors need to be opened.
One more thing you just did, which I like very much. You put on the tinfoil hat and you talk, and you've had experience with basically telepathy. Now, It happens, just to make it clear, that I actually have published a peer-reviewed paper demonstrating telepathy with one of my graduate students.
Yeah.
Not my main line of work, but he was interested. We did it, got it published, and I think it happens. Yeah. It's not an easy thing to control, but it does happen. And why is the tinfoil hat important? Because you can do telepathy with electromagnetic radiation. Mm-hmm. And that's been demonstrated also. You can also do it with ultrasonic radiation. And there are two ways to stop that getting into your head. And basically, it means putting on a tinfoil hat, because tinfoil and another substance called, I've forgotten right now, is a insulator against both electromagnetic radiation and sonic radiation. There's a man named Michael Mencken, who nobody knows, but I corresponded with, maybe some of you do, definitely in the UFO world, but not outside, who has built these insulating hats, given them to people who have experienced abductions, who say, and Michael has not reported this in a published paper, but he's written about it, that it stops or eliminates abductions until the ETs come and make the people take them off. Now, this is a story from Michael Mencken, and I think Michael Mencken is an intelligent and creative inventor who has given us something that only a few people yet appreciate, and that's people in the abduction world, put it that way.
I had no idea. So this thing actually, just besides being a prop, actually has a service if I want to turn off the communication. But when I get stuff that I get resonance coming in,
Right.
it's something that actually I feel it, but it goes through and just cascades across my entire body in different patterns. And it literally raises the hair on my entire body that I can feel it when it's coming in. I guess it's like an 18.5 hertz wave of
Wow.
stuff that, you know, kind of precedes the different things. It's almost like a replay of, I remember initially seeing the white light before I went up in the ship. And when I saw that white light, it kind of just brings over this feeling of elation, of just feeling of bliss, and in just any kind of thought of anything bad. And you're just kind of in this state of euphoria to a degree. It's almost like it's causing the release of, not serotonin. What's the one chemical in your brain that you get that you release? Endorphins or something to a degree. Something goes on to where when I go back to that memory, I get that sensation that flows through my body, but also when I'm getting contact from externally of me, I get that same kind of a sensation. But it's interesting, every single thing from a spiritual aspect that I've gotten from it has a different profile, a different order of what part of the body gets strong, what parts are hit. And it actually helps me, if you want to call it, to identify some of the things that I'm dealing with.
If you're interested in not experiencing that or experience it under your own control, then look up Michael Menkin, Menkin, on Google. And he has a website and you can find out about it.
In the preview of your book, you wrote that it was like about 40 to 44% of people that wore the hat, it stopped the abductions with them until, like you said, when they were forced to take the hat off or other circumstances. So that's very significant.
Yeah, I agree.
And just quite frankly, you know, for $59.95, literally, to put a stop to that, that's prolific information.
Well, it's there. It's not widely understood. Nobody's done a research paper on it, but I think Mencken is a credible and intelligent and capable person, and I've corresponded with him. So there, an endorsement for Michael Mencken's.
Yeah, I've got his, and he actually came up with something called the Neuro Hat back in 2015 that may help cure headaches, epilepsy, and other things. So he's definitely an inventor, and he's got a website called stopabductions.com. So there we go.
There we go. Okay. Well, again, that's stuff that's working. People are working on this problem. You've experienced the problem, Tom.
Yeah.
I haven't. I'm very glad I haven't. But we've got to deal with it as a culture, as a species. So
Right.
that if we're not going to be in charge, we're at least coming back as equals or semi-equals to the people who are basically, to put it in plain language, messing with us. Maybe in our own interest, maybe not. But we're being messed with in any case.
Yeah. It's no different than us, and I see it in a way for us going ahead and flying with a helicopter, tracing, going after a rhino, hitting them with, shooting them. But that's a lot more traumatic than some of the things we've got going on. And then doing surgeries, pulling blood, doing different stuff to him, putting tracking devices on them, and then letting them wake back up and come out of it. And it's like, what the hell happened? And then they kind of go off. But we continue to monitor them. So it's almost along those same kind of lines.
Quite right. I agree with you.
What are your thoughts on what are your thoughts on the United States government only starting with cases back into the early 2000s as opposed to the mid 1940s? Investigating. Do you think there's something behind that? As maybe they're trying to get rid of, because to me that was kind of like the dark era, right? Like from 1945 to 2000. Do you think they're trying to erase all those decades and only trying to stick?
That's part of Don's book, who's talking about the lies.
Yeah, the book's title is Truth, Lies, and ETs, How We Stumbled into the Galaxy. So I cover the lies part, which is from about 1947, when this first came to public attention, right up to 2017, when these videos were leaked. And I'm not sure whether they were leaked deliberately. I don't think so. What I understand, and I have no proof of this, and Elizondo says this basically, is that the videos got out accidentally because they were downloaded from the cruiser, from the or from the aircraft carrier on somebody
shortly after,
and they're just stuck into and made public immediately afterwards. So the government was finally stuck. They couldn't deny them. They were US Navy videos, and so they had to come forward
Right.
with some kind of acknowledgement.
So I guess what happened was Christopher Mellon had somehow gotten his hands on these videos through Elizondo and the Pentagon. And then from there, they just went and leaked them to the Washington Post and got it out there. So there is no, if you want to call it, closing the Pandora's box. Now, Linda Thompson in the chat earlier asked, have you ever met Elizondo or Christopher Mellon?
I met Elizondo at a Mufon conference back in 2018, I guess. We were actually both on the same panel and sat next to each other talking to the press. So I have met him. I don't know him, but I sat next to him and we introduced ourselves. Mellon I've never met, sorry to say.
Yeah.
I do know the other author of that of those New York Times articles, Leslie Kane, who's a very good UFO journalist, and I'm sure you're all familiar with her. I hope you are.
Yeah, of course. She's, she did a lot to try and bring this out and, put her, if you want to call it, neck on the line as a writer to try and, convince her publisher to go ahead and bring this story out because it deserved to be told. Right.
She did, and she succeeded. And that's great.
Yeah. Now, going back to the truth, one thing I wanted to cover that we haven't gotten there yet was, one of the things you're talking about was who gets abducted and how.
Yeah. Well, now that's the dullest part of the book. I'm sorry, because that's the part that deals with mostly my research.
Right.
Some other people's research. What is the difference between abducted people and other people? And we did some experiments. The we being the late Bud Hopkins and a guy named Ted Davis, who worked with Bud to develop a long psychology questionnaire. Ted was a social scientist, a social worker who had a background, a good education background in statistics. And he and Bud developed a long 608 item true-false questionnaire. And its purpose was to get a fix on what kind of answers abducted people would give to this questionnaire. So I came along, having met Bud or knew him anyway, and said, look, you can't use that unless you know what two other kinds of people answer. One kind of people are people you have no reason to believe had any abduction experience. And the other kind of people is people you tell to fake it, even though you know they've never had the experience. So you've got three groups. I'm sorry to sound like a professor, because this is the boring part. You've got a group of people that Bud Hopkins and his psychologist helpers thought were abductees, people whose personalities were normal, but whose anxiety was high and whose experiences under hypnosis were abduction experiences. Then you've got a group of people who I found in Montreal, around McGill, where I teach, who were normal people. We told we were developing a psychological test. Would you mind just being a control group? We'll give it to you. No, you won't get paid anything, but thanks for your help. And a third group, we told, you're going to take this test and you're going to pretend you've been abducted by aliens. So we want you to answer this test the way you think you'd answer it if your experiences were being abducted by aliens. So that's three groups. A group of people, Hopkins and Davis, on the basis of psychological profiles of those people and their hypnotically regressed experiences, thought were real abductees. A group of people we thought were controls, and a group of people we told to fake the test. The statistics I won't bore you with, but we got a fair number of people to fake the test. Pardon me?
No, that was just me screwing up the audio. Sorry about that. Continue.
Anyway, we got these three groups to take the test, and they scored completely differently on the test. It's easy to separate out the abductees from the fakers and the controls. So the people who get abducted can be distinguished by how they answer a psychological test. And that's answer number one. Second answer, since you asked me to do the boring part, is that we then got a collection of the things they saw on board the UFOs. This includes symbols that people recall under hypnosis having seen. Then a fellow named Stuart Appel, the late Stuart Appel, another colleague of mine, a psychologist interested in UFOs, and who also was a hypnotist, hypnotized a bunch of people near his university and got them to imagine being abducted on a UFO. And then he got them under hypnotic recall to remember, quote unquote, what they saw in the way of symbols on the UFO. So we had two groups. We had real UFO symbols and we had imagined UFO symbols. And I did the statistics on this again. I won't bore you with that. And those people are completely distinguishable. The real symbols don't look anything like the fake symbols. So in the dullest part of my book, you read about how you can tell the difference between people who are really abductees and people who either fake it or were told to imagine it. So there's a distinction. Abductees are real, period.
And just to let you know, what you think other groups might think is boring, the statistics to us would be fascinating to hear. So don't think you have to water that part down and exclude it, because some of it's, do like the nerd stats thrown in.
Okay, well, the nerd stats are all available online, or I'll send you a copy if you want one.
Well, I'm just saying, if you do want to share that as part of what
Or talk about or anything to that
go ahead
degree.
and do it.
Yeah.
Sure, well, I can put these things up. I can give you URLs for them. It's no problem. Not right now. Well, I'll do it later. Put it that way.
Of course.
Just however you want to do it. Don't think you have to limit it because of the target audience. Feel free to speak freely, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, these are the nerds who want to hear all the details.
And they'll be coming out soon. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I don't mean to be condescending either. I'm sorry. It's just
no, you're not.
Okay.
No, not at all.
Yeah. You've got a book coming out, isn't it? The one we're talking about, kind of going through the truths, or lies, and ETs. When does it due to come out? Is it beginning of next year?
Yeah, March 2022. It'll be out mid-March.
Very cool.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing it out too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we've got the lies, the next section of your book, and you've got two different areas. One is called the dark side and the good side. Let's talk about the dark side first.
Well, the dark side goes right back to the very beginning, when the U.S. government started denying that there was anything to the UFO story. And remember, this is also in the book, the first widely publicized sighting was Kenneth Arnold's in 1947, when he saw what turned out to be called flying saucers, flying across the Cascade Mountains. He was a pilot. He saw them from the air. And then other people who he talked to when he landed had also seen similar things on that, I think it was July 1947 trip he was taking across the Cascades. Mm-hmm. And then a couple of weeks later, the Roswell incident happened. And the Roswell incident was a crashed UFO, which the government immediately covered up by producing a fake story and circulating it widely, by shutting up the people who had actually seen this, until people like Don Schmidt and Kevin Randall and others got, after years of painstaking research, back to the people who'd seen it, uncovered the original data, talked to the morticians who'd seen the bodies, and so forth and so on. They uncovered the truth behind an event that was totally covered up by the U.S. government immediately after it happened. And from then on, the U.S. government, until 2017, made deliberate efforts to downplay and denigrate the presenters of the real UFO evidence. The U.S. government's websites denied it. The U.S. Air Force said there was nothing to it. And that continued until basically the story got out in 2017.
Right.
It's too clear to any longer be denied.
What kind of damage does that do to a person who's gone through this, and after you've gone through this kind of traumatic experience, and then you're going and you're basically told that what you see isn't real, and if you talk about it, we're gonna get you fired from your job and other types of things in the way that they have?
I don't know. I wish I did. I'm not a clinical psychologist. If I had been, I might have ended up trying to help some of these people. But, but it can't be. Especially if you're threatened with dismissal, you're told what you have to say is unbelievable, and you're ridiculed for saying it. And that's happened to a lot of people. Again, it didn't happen to me, and I'll tell you why it didn't happen. I had tenure. I was a tenured university professor. That meant that aside from committing a crime or not showing up for class, I couldn't be fired from my job. I could say what I wanted, and I did. And I was able to back it up, but not everybody in the world has that privilege. And I'm aware of that. It's a great privilege, and I appreciate having entered into that privileged state in about 1965. And it stood me in good stead since. But I very much sympathize with the people, including, I think, some of the ones I'm talking to, who've had to deal with this in the face of public dismissal, ridicule, and basically being dissed, put it plainly. I haven't. I mean, if I had the background and this structure to support me, and that is something I'm very grateful for. Thank you, McGill University. You've been with me. Yeah.
It's something that apparently goes ahead and takes the whole point of tenure and made it actually something that's a real positive aspect of it, that made you, allowed you to be able to talk about this stuff and not have when someone say, okay, you're out of here, you've talked about the wrong thing, you've gone down the wrong path.
You're absolutely right, and I appreciate that, and I'm a strong supporter of tenure if the person who gets it has proved his or her merit after some test period, which I did go through.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a lot of the same pushback we get, that they mainstream academia labels us as alternative researchers because we look into ancient megaliths and structures and the possibility of ancient civilizations. So once we start talking about any of that, we're automatically labeled alternative researchers, and those that are vested with their careers or their peers, they get rejected. So some of us that aren't so constrained by those limitations are able to color outside the lines and pursue these investigations and interests without fear of losing our income or our credibility and things. It's some like me that are ghosts in the machine that aren't known by much of anybody. It has no effect what other people think. So I'm free to research and express as I please without fear of retribution, financially or reputation wise by my peers.
I appreciate that, and I think you're brave to do it regardless. I have two worlds myself. I have a professional world, which I don't discuss here, and the UFO world, which I don't discuss among my professional colleagues.
Yeah.
They may know it's there, but I don't push it in their faces, put it that way.
Speaking of kind of things you're involved in, are you able to go ahead and talk on the channel live about the project you're kind of involved in right now with the French agency? I mean, the Canadian agency?
Well, I'm in my consulting role, which by the way, I started a consulting company in human factors, which is what you might call the business and engineering side of applied psychology. Back in 1982, we worked with two professors from the U of T, University of Toronto, in Toronto, and two from McGill. And of those four original founders, only one, that's me, is still with the company. A couple of them who were older died, another guy retired, and there are newer people in it. But that company does all sorts of practical applications of both psychology, kinesiology, and other studies, industrial engineering included, that go into making a world that's more efficient for people to use. At the moment, our company is working with a Canadian engineering company to help design what's called Canadarm3, which is the external grab on the outside of what will be the Artemis NASA lunar orbiter. Canadian Space Agency has built the thing called Canadarm2, which sits on the outside of the International Space Station and grabs satellites that come up to provide new crews and stuff like that. Canadarm3, which is still being designed, is the one that will sit on the outside of the new NASA Artemis orbiter, which will be orbiting the moon and then eventually sending off a crew to Mars. And that's still at the planning stage.
Yeah. It's amazing that you have this open perspective on ETs and UFOs and everything. And even in, you've been researching this for a very long time. You've been involved in it, spoken Mufon many times on panels, and now you're actually part of our future space exploration, which just shows how much you have a passion for this and something that you're kind of really interested in. Now, I do have a question from Linda Thompson. She wanted to know, Donderi's research on dreams. Do you think ETs can communicate in dreams, project their thoughts, etc., to people through a sleep state?
That's an excellent question. I don't know the answer. They can certainly communicate telepathically with people who are awake. Whether they can do it in a dream state or not is an excellent question, and I don't know the answer. That's a safe academic answer, really. Don't speculate if you don't know, and that's what I just don't know. But it's a reasonable possibility. And since they certainly can communicate and influence you when you're alert and they're interested in controlling you, they can do that. I know that.
Yeah.
On the topic of academia, also think about what they have to go through to rewrite grades 1 through 12. All the books would all the rules would change, and not only that, but laws. There would be like I'm sure there'd be different kind of laws also, like what you can and can't do, and it just, I mean, could you imagine the all the books and everything? It's all has to be rewritten.
We're at the beginning of a new epoch in human history, put it plainly. How fast that evolves and where it will go, I have no idea. They could go away tomorrow and not come back. That's unlikely, I think, given what's going on. But we don't control it. And we've got to deal with it. How we deal with it, I haven't a clue. I think I start the new book by saying I can't recall the exact first sentence, but it's something like, humanity is going through a revolution. And it's not one that's widely understood yet, but it's happening as we read, basically. And I think that's true.
Yeah. We're going through all the same parallel with ancient history with go back, like Jeppe, pushing it back 6,000 years prior to the former accepted date of the start of known civilizations, to where it's looking like that may have even been the end of a former civilization. And we won't even debate whether was advanced or any aspect of it, even that it had a civilization prior to that.
Yeah.
That looks like that they had cities and city-states and things of that nature. So that aspect of history is pushing to need revised and rewritten as well. So
Yeah.
we're right on the edge of that. So it's kind of fascinating to me to see both of these worlds coming together at the same time on the research and the facts that are becoming more and more proven and mainstream. And that's what we help do, is network a lot of different people together to bring them together in communities to be force multipliers, so we don't keep reinventing the wheel over and over with individuals, and consolidate our efforts.
I agree with you, and I have one embarrassing experience to report along those lines. I was invited to appear on an episode of Ancient Aliens. So I flew down to Washington and was interviewed in a very nice setting, but I knew nothing about ancient aliens, so they got nothing out of me. I was totally ignorant on the subject you're clearly not ignorant about, and I know that subject will develop, and that what people called ancient gods, ancient experiences, all needs to be relooked at and put into a new context. And this context is the one we're talking about. But
most of us in that field don't really subscribe to ancient aliens, because they slant it to the marketability and sensationability of what they're trying to advance, not true facts in history. They have a different agenda.
Okay.
So we just don't gravitate around that community.
Okay.
Which is fine, but if you want to talk about your experience, it's fascinating to hear. It's just we try and stay scientific and follow, what's plausible and realistic and things of that nature. Kind of like what you were talking about on how you guys follow the chain of evidence and things on evidentiary discoveries, that nature.
Well, I'm looking forward to your next book then, for sure. Seriously. Or your papers or whatever. I'm serious about that, because that needs covering too. Yeah,
I've thought about that, but it's voluminous work, definitely. But I retain I've got a photographic memory, so I happen to remember a whole lot of useless information.
Write it down. Let us read it.
Yeah. So, I can tell you, Rob can write volumes very easily, a very well articulated, a lot of big words, a lot of detail. And it's just like, we go back and forth on text messaging and sometimes, and it's just like, boy, he can write. And that's a good thing. Some people have that gift, and that's one of the gifts that Rob definitely has, besides having the ability to remember all this stuff. He does tons and tons of research and can easily recall it at different points, but then he can recall it in all the different parts and express it in ways that's just purely amazing.
Well, I'll tell you something else about the writing world, which I learned trying to market the second book. I sent basically publicity blurbs, to many major publishers, the kind that you get hardcover copies. This is what happened to all of them. Then I started looking at what's going on now. The publishing world has completely changed. Basically, and I'm putting it plainly because these things have evolved with the internet, anybody can produce and publish a book. And there are lots of people who are unconventional publishers who publish with less I'm not talking about vanity publishers, by the way, people who do it for a fee. but people who will publish a book conventionally, but with different marketing arrangements, with different preparation arrangements, and much less formality than the big international publishers. So a book that's will be interesting to some people on its own merits is more likely to get published now than it might have been 5 years ago. Put it plainly, simply. I know that from experience.
Yeah.
I know one of our favorite. I'm sorry. One of our favorite things I saw also that you talk about are those Dr. Pius patents from the Navy.
Salvatore Pius. He was.
Oh yeah, those. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Oh,
those are public documents.
Yeah.
And again, I'm a psychologist. When I write a bit about how do ETVs work, my disclaimer is, I don't know, because my training is not physics and engineering physics. But here's what the public documents say. And the Pius patent is one of them.
Yeah.
There's a patent for an anti-gravity machine that the US government has issued.
Yeah, there's that. There's a room-sized, what do you call it? A shipping container-sized fusion reactor. They have a anti-gravitational device. They have something for creating a gravitational warp field, and they've got something for what's the last one?
Did you mention the room temperature superconductor?
Oh yeah, and room temperature superconductivity. So they have all these different things that are major advances. And when I saw those, it's kind of when I looked at them and I saw some of the stuff of what they came from, and it was like, we have too much of an advancement coming from one man in the Navy. And the things that's, you know, about the Navy is why the Navy? Well, if you look at it from an exposure perspective, they're on the oceans, they're seeing these things all the time. And if you want to call it perspective or seeing this to a degree, it's almost to a point of where you have to wonder, who specifically, which alien gave him this information, told him how to recreate it to a degree, but more importantly, what was the cost we paid to get that information? Because usually anytime you get stuff like that, there's always a cost.
Very good questions. I think maybe you guys can put together a technical volume that will answer these questions. That's an excellent approach. I don't know. Again, my research on this, quote unquote, was basically reading patent documents and a couple of other things. And that's minimal. And I don't claim, as I can't claim, the expertise in this area. It needs to be put together by technically competent people. And that's a project. Somebody else's project. Go to it.
Yeah, that makes me happy saying that most people, some people claim to be expert in all this, but yeah, that's one of my favorite things to dig into, especially. And then I know that this is kind of off the beaten path, but what are your thoughts on the grays maybe always appearing in threes? Have you ever thought about that aspect of the abduction side?
No, I haven't. So please tell me about it. I literally don't know.
Oh no, it's just we were talking in our last few conversations that we've been noticing that the grays always show up in threes, and we were thinking maybe it had to do with kind of like a an army, or what were we saying, like a defense kind of stance, so like you always have one down at the bottom of your feet, and then one to like kind of like sedate you, and then the other one kind of just stand there, so that way if one of them gets hurt or whatever, there'd always be another one to back it up. So just thoughts on that, and I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on maybe.
I don't, because I'm ignorant about that. Seriously, I know about grays, I know about the other possible types, or I think I do, of ETs that show up, but I have not looked into that, and it's news to me. I couldn't have told you on an exam, since I think like a professor, that showed up in threes. True or false? I would have answered false, and I would have been wrong. So there. It's something to work on, and I haven't done it. So go to it.
Go to it, right? There, trust me, it's one thing after another. It's round circles sometimes. So just fun to think about.
Okay. Yeah. No.
Right. Gray Troll was saying, could the study that you mentioned about abducted people, that some people are pretending in, and it can be used to find a way to check if someone was abducted and they can't remember it, is this something that can maybe also be applied to something with machine learning? Or is it you've pretty got a good idea of, based on the answers that they're coming across, where they're going to fit into the different categories?
Well, there's a statistical technique called discrimination. basically multi-factor discrimination analysis, and I use that. It's a standard statistical technique. It's been available for years. And you put the numbers in, you run the program, and out comes a probability graph, basically, that tells you how likely this person is to be in any one of those three groups. And I've done that, but the statistics are well established and not controversial. Whether, again, it didn't require machine learning to develop that statistical analysis, just collecting the true-false data and putting it through this kind of analytical technique. So that's old hat stuff for psychologists. Nothing special about that. Nothing requiring machine learning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just time and looking at it and understanding it and trying to figure out which particular part that it goes into. Now, we've kind of talked about the dark side of the lies that are there. What about the good side?
Well, I talked about in the good side, all of the people, the hundreds and hundreds of serious people who've been looking at the UFO phenomenon since it started, since people started paying attention to it anyway. Now, the first reports, as I'm sure you all know, probably go back. Again, I deal very peripherally with ancient aliens because I talk about the pictures from the 16th century and the myths that might be described as alien appearances.
The 1561 woodcut in Germany.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I just go over that very lightly because I don't have any background or expertise in that. So what I do instead is concentrate on what's happened since 1947.
Right.
There, the data are there. The hundreds of people who've been studying this since then, many of them are quite open about it. They've published many, many books, and they go back to the early part of this time. People I know named Jerry Clark, who's published a whole encyclopedia on this stuff. There are other people who've assembled books. Michael Swords, who's put one together. Most of this stuff on UFOs, but some of it on abductions. And
Right.
of course, you can't distinguish between the two at some point.
Yeah.
And the abduction research has come more recently.
Yeah.
But it's all there. People have basically put their reputations on the line to publish this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's all out there. Hundreds of people, literally,
Right.
and have made public statements about the fact that basically UFOs are extraterrestrial and somebody's aboard them and they may be messing with us. I wasn't
Right.
the first person to come up with these ideas, for sure.
Absolutely. Now, Beverly Holmes in the chat brings up a good question. Brings up a good point, saying, "Wasn't there differences in brain structures discovered through MRIs?"
I
And
don't
I
know
believe
the answer.
there
I don't
was
know
a
the
recent
Sorry.
there was a recent study that was out there that was published in the last 3 or 4 months, I believe, where they actually were able to find different parts of the brain that had different amounts of activity going on it that were consistent going across all people who had close experiences with ETs.
I did not know that. Thank you very much, Beverly. I will look that up.
Yeah, that may be something of interest to you, just because it's a part of the area of academics you're going into, and it is published studies where they've actually found structures in the brain that almost looks like, I believe it's the eye of Horus, which is around the structures going around the third eye in the brain.
I would love to know about that. If I can get it in, I might be able to modify the book to include that.
Yeah,
And thank you very much for bringing this to my attention. That's great. And again, that's part of what I think is happening. Malcolm Gladwell, the writer, talked about the tipping point, where a lot of little things build up until you can no longer ignore a phenomenon. And I think that's basically happened.
Linda Thompson, who's a researcher in this particular area, said the study is coming from Dr. Gary Nolan with Stanford. So there was an initial report out of what he's discovered and what they're doing and everything. The full report isn't out yet, but they basically provided some insight to what's going on.
Terrific. Thank you. That's great news. I'm delighted. And I think this is part of this changing world. It's happening before your eyes, and I didn't know about it. And here's something that's going on as we speak, just about, that's moving the case forward. This is exciting.
Yep.
It really is.
And that's what we like about this, and in the media of how we talk and how we go back and forth. It opens up a level of collaboration between people, even like everyone who's in the chat room right now, except 5D Raver. Thank you for coming, 5D Raver. you're now a moderator. Please go ahead, if you haven't, click that subscribe button. But basically, we allow anyone in the chat room to go ahead and share links, because everyone has the wrench. That means they're a moderator, and they're able to go ahead and be able to share and collaborate. And someone says, hey, we've got a link about this. Check this out. In most places where you go and you watch YouTube broadcasts, no one can go ahead and share links because YouTube prohibits it. But when you're a moderator, you can. So it's something that we go ahead and do to, if you want to call it, improve our ability to collaborate as a group, because only as if we come together as a group of people and we really start talking about this and collaborating on it, that's the only way we're going to be able to really advance where we're going.
Well, look, it's just happened. I'm delighted. That's terrific. Thank you.
Yeah. So back to the good side.
I just wrote about as many of the people as I could and the groups that I could that were dealing with this. And there are more than I can remember, basically, but I list the main ones. And some of them are people I know, some of them are people I don't know, but they've all been working at this. And the first good guy, so to speak, who made a name for himself was J. Allen Hynek, who you all know about, I'm sure. He was hired by the US government to investigate UFO report as an astronomer. And he was first skeptical back in the 50s. I can't recall exactly when I came on board. But then he became unskeptical and wrote a book about it. And I go through in the bad side the history of the US government's involvement, denials, so forth and so on. And the good side, mentioned by name, as many as the people as I can't cram them all into a short part of a book, who were instrumental in promoting the good side, if you want to put it that way, including the one guy who was a martyr to this, James McDonald, who some of you may know about. He was an astronomer. Is this a familiar story? I won't bore you with it if it's not, but he was an astronomer who was doing atmospheric research on clouds. And as a result, he was interested in UFOs because he'd seen one. As a result of his atmospheric research connections, he was able to get permission to look at data that had been collected at the at either the University of Ohio or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base on atmospheric conditions, including evidence in the UFO files. And in the UFO files, he discovered that there was a lot of atmospheric information and also evidence of the cover-up. And he went public with it. And he was ridiculed. He was basically again, this is a story that's well known. It's not my story. A skeptic, a basically evil person named Philip Klass, complained to the government that he had government contracts and anybody who believes in UFOs should be taken off those government contracts. His life fell apart. He tried to commit suicide. He succeeded, and he is, if you like, a martyr to standing up for what you might call the good side on the UFO field. And he's, I hope, the first and the last person who ever has to undergo an experience like that and not come out of it, put it that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Some of you may know about him because he's certainly a name known to people in the UFO field.
Mm-hmm. Just really quick, if people are interested in your book, Don, your last book that you had, Truth Lies, and that wasn't Truth Lies. Their first book was UFOs, ETs, and Alien Abductions. A scientist looks at the evidence. Right. So in those lines, I've pinned that book at the top of our chat. So if anyone's interested in getting that book, Linda Thompson, thanks you, Linda, went ahead and shared that link, and I've pinned that to the top of the chat. So anyone who's interested can go ahead and click that link, and it'll pop open a new window, and you can check out his book.
Thing you very much. I appreciate that. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess Harvard is now looking into UAPs with the Galileo project.
That's the thing Avi Loeb started. Is that right? That's the guy we're talking about. The astronomer who discovered this thing flying past the sun, and it didn't seem to be on an orbital course. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So he thought it might be a UAP. You're quite right. And he's spoken out about that. I have never spoken to him, but he's certainly another name that's part of the tipping point.
Right.
Forward, and that's good. Harvard's on side. Well, who else do we need? It's just about like that.
Right.
Not quite that simple, but that's a help. Yeah.
Right. And some of the organizations that you went and, if you want to call it, identified as on the good side is the American Active ETV Study Organizations, such as the Center for Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, the Center for UFO Studies, the
That's right.
International UFO Congress, the Mufon, which is
That's
the
right.
Mutual UFO Network, and of course the National UFO Reporting Center. And there's one
Right.
additional one, which is NARCAP, which is the National Aviation Reporting Center for Anomalous phenomena.
Right. Yeah.
Anomalous
I forgot
phenomena.
I'll remember. Maybe I'll bring that up to date if I left out one.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you.
And
Okay.
a really interesting thing about NARCAP is the reason it was founded was because Ted Rowe, who's currently, he was initially started the organization with a scientist from NASA, Dr. Hines. And after he had a abduction scenario, a really critical one that had happened, and he reached out to Dr. Hines, Richard Hines, and they started up NARCAP, and they started going and researching all of the different sightings going back almost 100 years in history.
You're talking about Richard Haynes.
Richard Haynes, yeah.
Yeah, a guy I know. Richard is a friend.
Oh, wow.
He worked at NASA in basically Silicon Valley, and was a human factors guy like me.
Yeah.
And we've met. So yes, I know Richard. I've met him. Spent a day at his house. Lives on the West Coast. Out on,
Yeah, he lives actually not that far from me, off of up in the islands up here, San Juan Island.
Yeah, that's neat.
Woodby Island, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Woodby Island. I know Richard, and I'm delighted. I will get NARCAP into the story. I forgot. Okay,
Yeah, and I think Richard may be kind of going through the last stages of his life at this point, and it may be worth you reaching out to him just to check in and see how he's doing.
Thank you very much. I will do that.
Yeah, but his collaborator Ted Rowe, who founded NARCAP with Richard, he's still out there, and if you want me to put you in contact with him, I'd be more than happy to.
Yes, please. I'd like that. If you just send me a note at some point, I'd appreciate that.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I will certainly get in touch with Richard. My wife and I spent a delightful day with him back in 2008. We were on the West Coast ourselves. Yeah.
Very interesting. It's such a small world, but you're connected with some really important people who have been influential, because Richard Hines went and he actually came up with the term UAP back in the 80s.
I've forgotten that, or didn't know that.
Yeah.
I will give credit where credit is due. I have no objection to that, for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'd love to ask, are you on Twitter? Because we've got a huge discussion groups for UFO Twitter, or UAP Twitter, and for ancient research, both. Both of those are.
I'm an old. I haven't got there yet. Sorry, but I can move my life to that direction.
No, if you want, we would be glad to. There was quite a lot of us who would like to have interactive, ongoing discussions with you on this. I think it would help network you in. Alex Dietrich, Favor, those people, they're on Twitter as well.
Oh my God, is Alex Dietrich on Twitter?
Yeah,
yeah,
they're in there. Lou Elizondo, he doesn't get on there much, but a lot of these major players are on UFO Twitter, or UAP Twitter. Excuse me.
Thank you. I would very much like to be read into that group, please. That's for sure.
Yeah.
No, that's tremendous. I didn't know that. Again, I'm not a heavy user of social media, as you can guess. I won't tell you how old I am. That explains it. But I can get there. That's for sure.
You don't have to be, but we like to try and, like we said, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. And when you have so much information, people like you to share, we like to be able to network it in. I saw the cover to your next book has Alex on it. I knew that if you were on Twitter, you might be interested to know people like her are on Twitter, and that would lend to their discussion to have you on there to help substantiate some of their suppositions as well. So this is a win-win for everybody to bring you on board.
Yeah.
Please read me in.
Hey, just like I'm helping you understand different stuff on tech and how we go ahead and do these live streams and stuff like that. If you want some help or, some coaching on how to get into Twitter and how it is and not to be afraid of it and just look at it from a small standpoint. And so if you want to call it just getting your toe in the water and just go from there. But it's an amazing community where there are people from so many different parts of life. There's scientists, there's doctors, there's business professionals, there's enterprise software architects, there's people who are veterans, and just people from all over the place that are, if you want to call it, involved in this, and they're there to talk about it, because a lot of them have had, besides just a curiosity, there's a lot of people who have been touched by the phenomena.
I need to be read into this. My only problem is How many, does that take 19 or 20 hours of the day? Or
No,
just,
no, just as little or as much time as you want to put into it.
Only kidding. I really mean that. I'm grateful for your thoughts about that, and I will certainly take you up on that, including getting in touch with, what's his name? The guy who's Richard's collaborator?
Ted Rowe.
Ted Rowe, yeah.
Yeah, from NARCAP. Yeah, I've got his number here in my phone, and I could also, there's a person who runs a website called UFOs Over Vegas. My mind is out today, and he's actually going out there using, if you want to call it, different equipment on a regular basis, and he's actually going and recording UAPs in the Las Vegas area, almost, not on a daily basis, but he's got some amazing video of things that are out there.
Okay, well, again, so much is going on. It's just hard for any one person to keep track of it all. And you've opened basically my mind to many things I hadn't thought of, including getting back in touch with Richard Haynes and Alex Dietrich online, which would be, or on Twitter, that would be fabulous.
That's what we like to do, is help network, and it slows down the work volume for a lot of us. It makes it easier because we can do it collectively instead of individually.
Right.
So, like with Thomas, he's, high tech and able to help, like me on some of the stuff I'm challenged with as well. So he's happy to help with, we're able to accentuate and help each other out in our strengths and weaknesses. So we work better as a team than as individuals. So the sum is more than our parts.
I'll tell you, Aura brings up a good point. I love Twitter. The news breaks so fast on it. So when there's news and different things about UAPs and everything going on, that's the place where everybody learns about it in the first. It's a really great connected, if you want to call, neural network of a lot of people who are all very fascinated with this, and as different parts of that network gather the information, they all bring it and they share it.
Thank you. I'm glad you're suggesting I join in, and I will. Just a couple of links or whatever I need to do, and I'll start.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll go from there. Getting back to your book, Truths, Lies, and ETs, it'll be out March of next year. I like the name of the press company, Moonshine Cove Press.
Yes. Well, I told you, I tried all the major publishers. Then I put it on the list of alternative publishers. And I probably went through about 50 or 60 before this guy named Gene Robinson, who runs a private press, not a vanity press. I'm not paying him to do the book, in other words, got to me and said, yeah, I'll do that. And that's terrific. What he does, and I think this is fairly common these days, he doesn't do publicity, but he does production. And the production is taken care of. And for those of you who care about this stuff commercially, the royalty arrangements are the usual. You get part, he gets a cut, and it's based on sales. Right. And you, the author, me, are responsible for publicizing the book. Right. And this is part of what I'm doing. And this came because the Fox News things that you saw was provided by a publicist I have hired and is working on my behalf. Right. A woman named Jocelyn Kelly, who works for a company called Kelly and Hall. And so I'm getting publicity, honestly paid for, but it's good. I'm working as a professional with this person, and she is doing a professional job for me. Yeah. And you're the evidence, frankly, because you got it through something that I did through. Yeah.
They need to bring you on Tucker Carlson or some of the other big stuff on their major Fox News, because you've got the kind of saying the kinds of stuff, even with Greg Gutfeld or any of the people who have their different shows up there, because they like talking about this topic and finding people who are intelligent as yourself and understands it and can articulate it. That's something, they always look for people from different viewpoints.
Well, that's kind of you to say. I appreciate that. Tucker Carlson would be an experience, put it that way.
Yeah, getting on Twitter and for Alex to find you on there, and for them to make the connection with you on those, you would be amazed at how many doors that would open and how many eyes that you've never even considered would be on you, and the publicity that would draw just by having some of the ongoing conversations with people like her. There are thousands of people that follow those conversations daily. And for you to just inject a sentence or two would multiply geometrically. You would blow your mind. Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is basically, as you can imagine, this is a new world for me. Yeah. I've never been on a YouTube podcast, let alone Twitter.
So
And-
Linda Thompson, who's really connected, and she's a phenomenal researcher. She said, "Thomas, I'd be glad to help you, Don. Go ahead and help you find a network with media, social, and everything as she could." She even brought up saying Richard Dolan Press is an option for your book potentially,
Interesting. That's
and also Gaddy Schwartz with NBC News would also help you.
I'm very grateful to Linda for those suggestions.
Yeah.
Do those get saved in some form where I can be downloaded so I remember them?
Yeah, of course. After the video is already up, you can go back and rewatch it and watch the chat coming through and pull stuff out of it again. We like to basically have this is, there's a lot of good things that go back and forth in our broadcasts, and being able to replay the chat of all the different feedback that's coming in. But I've got on my list for you to hook you up with Ted and with Linda coming out of this, and we can work with you on Twitter and other stuff as well.
Thank you. This is extremely valuable. I'm very grateful to you all, by the way.
Yeah.
You
You'll
invited
have our emails, and I'd like to open up a line of communication with you better, ongoing after this, obviously, with emails and however you want to continue conversations. But yeah, most definitely would want to keep in touch and
well, thank you.
corroborate our mutual interests.
I'll tell you what I think has happened. I don't know if this is true, but again, I talked about the tipping point has happened. Now it is not it's not politically correct to be against this anymore. It's politically correct to be interested in it. You may say you're a skeptic, but you're still interested enough to want to hear about it. And that's a big, big change from about a year ago. And that's all. It started in 2017, but I think it really blew open. I think honestly on May 10th of this year. Why? Because a guy named Gideon Lewis Krause published a New Yorker article on the subject based around about Leslie Kean. It was a profile of Leslie with a lot of stuff thrown in. And I think because the Times had done it in 2017, the New Yorker did it in 2021, mainstream America is now on board. And that, I think, has changed. What it has changed, I hope, for the life of people who've gone through this experience, which I haven't, is some kind of confirmation psychologically that you're not alone. And that's not saying we're not alone, but you're not alone, that you can live in the world without fear, without shame, without, now I'm sounding like a clinical psychologist, and I'm not, but you can live in the world as a member of it without feeling weird. I mean, it's a weird experience, but it's an experience other people are having, and we can get through it, and we've got to deal with it as a collective, as a society. Yeah. Now that's me preaching, but I'm preaching like a clinical psychologist, which I'm not. But I think it's true just the same.
Right. Well, I guess you could call it being preaching, but it's almost you're just trying to go ahead and share and communicate and take your point of view and bring it out. And we find that it's very valuable of how you see things. If we go into the next part of your book, we've got ETs.
Yeah.
ETs imagined and real.
Yeah. Well, we've been imagining them for centuries, basically. Little creatures from outer space, whether they're angels or devils or whatever, creatures we don't know about, but influence our lives, have been in our lives, and this is what historians know, for as long as recorded history. What they are is another question. Mm-hmm. And that that's the historical part that I don't pretend to know anything about or be a scholar on. But since, again, recent history, my real focus point on this goes back to about 1890 something, whenever H.G. Wells published War of the Worlds. And there we had a modern science fiction novel about aliens landing and destroying London. And that sort of set the tone for what's been going on since. And it set panic in motion. Again, what I say in the book, and this is not my experiences, I knew Bud Hopkins, by the way, the late Bud Hopkins. He was a friend, as was Leslie Kean. But Bud, and I say this in the book, and it's a story he writes about in his memoirs. He was a little kid. He was born in 31. This all happened in 39, 40, I can't recall, 38, when Orson Welles produced a radio version of H.G. Wells' novel by interrupting a music broadcast to say, "We have a report from New Jersey. Aliens have landed." And then took it on with screams and and
Mhm.
fighting and stuff like that. And it freaked out one of Bud's father's employees, who called and said, "You better leave. You better leave. We're getting out of town." And that was one of the earlier things in Bud's life that got him interested in the UFO phenomenon. More came later, but that's where it begins. We knew about UFOs. We've been fantasizing or fictionalizing about UFOs ever since. The movies have been full of them. I don't have any grandchildren, but I have lots of great nephews and great nieces, and they grew up with all of these ETs, the nice ones and the not so nice ones. And so they've been a part of our lives fictionally, and therefore ingrained in our culture for several decades at least. And of course, it goes back to when I was a boy as well.
Yeah.
So here we are. Now we've got imagined ETs, we've got real ETs. I know less about real ETs than I should. I can tell you about tall grays and short grays. I can read about in some of the very voluminous books that have been published about the insectilans, about the reptilians, and so forth and so on. And I've actually seen photographs taken from apartment hallways of insectilans approaching the door, which I would never share with anyone. First of all, because I'm not authorized to, and secondly, because it's so easy to be taken in by something like this that somebody will produce. But in this case, I have some belief in the credentials of the person who's shown them. So I know they're out there. I know they're different guys and girls or whatever. And I know we have to deal with them. But I cannot precisely say who we're dealing with, how they're interrelated. I don't have a picture of the Intergalactic Federation in the way of a chart to lay out. So here I'm almost as ignorant as the next layperson, put it that way.
Have you hypnotized many of your subjects in study, or
No.
were they just I'm not saying or to minimize it, but that was a different demographic and technique that you were using. You were
I'm not.
doing the regressions with them.
I don't know how to do that. I'm not a hypnotherapist. I've never learned. And so the only abductees I've come in contact with, I've come in contact either with, I'm not kidding, either at parties or socially or in conversations, but never at the depth where I was inducing hypnosis and they were telling me things. Again,
So you're talking about your control group studies and things of that nature. I didn't know if that was part of it, part of that or not.
no, I don't know how to do that. Again, I'm not trained in it. I never was. I never got any clinical training as a psychologist, only research training. And so that's beyond my skill set at the moment. So I'm less than fully qualified to do what I'm doing, put it that way.
I looked at your 33-page list of accomplishments that you had sent Thomas to try and minimize that you're not trained in something. I think that's a very, very humble of you to say, but your academic track record is immense.
But that's one thing I can't talk about as an expert, and I can't defend as somebody who knows how to do it. That's
right,
because I know it can be done. I know it. I trust people I've talked to who've done it, among whom Bud Hopkins, who learned hypnosis himself and did it. But I never did, and I know all of the pitfalls. I've read about those as well, and I'm prepared to say that. And I know several hypnotherapists who've done this kind of work in Quebec, and I trust the quality of the work they've done, but I can't do it myself.
I can imagine trying to figure if somebody was telling a false story or not can only get get a lot harder today, only because all the information's already out there. Imagine back in the 1950s, there was no mass communications out there to get the same story or even pull pieces, off of each story as it is like today. So I'm wondering if there's maybe has anybody came across maybe new techniques or maybe a different kind of question. I mean, I know they did that in the Zamora case where they, said that they intentionally mismarked the imprint on the side. So as far as going that, but I mean, I was just wondering if there are any new techniques or something.
Well, somebody mentioned something. Was just mentioned a guy named Gary Nolan at Stanford was doing some MRI research. And if that research confirms what you might call differential brain activation in the brains of people telling UFO stories or abduction stories that can be confirmed versus people who quote fake them, we're on the same path again. We're doing research to basically verify the veracity of those studies. I'm looking into that, obviously. Thank you. I guess it was Linda who said that. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'll get. I'm ready.
Actually, it was somebody else, but either way, maybe it was Ethereal Aura had brought that up, but it's just something that's there, as it's something that I've talked about on the show several times, and over on my other show, on our other show, which is Inviting the Phenomena, where we've been bringing on different women who are part of the phenomena, and this is part of the research, because there's just such a not a place to give a voice, because it's an industry that's mostly dominated by men.
Okay. Well, I'm fascinated by this, and you've introduced me, obviously, in this community.
Yeah.
To a way of talking to people about this that I wasn't aware of. I knew it existed, but I never participated. So
you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's so much fun. You talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere. Just think about it, because you were talking. Remember how you were talking about how people get so many different information. Everybody goes off on their own path. Well, we need to try and bottleneck all that information and start maybe trying picking out lists of pure facts, and maybe that can direct us in a better, a way. Hopefully, in the long run.
The only problem I see is that I'll be on this 24 hours a day. When will I sleep? When will I get any work done?
You just have to go ahead and take anything like this within reason, and just limit yourself. Oh, I've got an hour here. I've got a half an hour there, a couple things, and just don't jump into it full stream, because trust me, I've been on Twitter, and you can easily just be sitting there. I actually have a PC that's hooked up to a 10-foot screen, so I'm sitting there in the theater watching television while I'm doing stuff on Twitter, and it's just time can fly by. But because there's information that's there, and being able to get, and the important part is being able to get dialed into the right people and have the right people that you're following, so you can get the right kind of information that you're looking for.
Everybody talks about your Twitter account and that sort of stuff, so I've been aware of this, but I've never participated. So thank you. I've obviously learned a lot in the last couple of hours.
And if any in the future beyond this, anytime that you ever want to come back on the show or talk about stuff or whatever it is, this is an open forum for you, and just feel like this is a place that you're welcome at any time.
Well, what I'm amazed by is the fact that you, Tom, are running this, and you're an experiencer, as they say. And I'm on I work with the experiencer research team at Mufon, so I talk to a lot of people.
Right.
But you manage it without it upsetting, as far as I can tell, the rest of your life, and that I'm very impressed by. I really am.
I use the filters that are available from Snap Camera, and I go ahead and I turn myself, and I'm looking like I'm 8 years old, maybe 8 years old or so, and it makes me look like a little kid. If I watch myself and I'm talking about it, and I start talking about the different stuff, the emotions, the fear, all the different kinds of stuff just pours back in, and I can't control it and I can't contain it. As I see myself today, I'm fine. But if I go back and I see myself as a persona back at that age, it's very hard to manage.
My next door neighbor on the other side of the wall is a psychotherapist. She works from home on her laptop during the COVID. I'm not sure I should tell her about UFO abductees, because I'm afraid she'd be overwhelmed by business in Montreal, as a matter of fact. I'm sympathetic, and as I said, from my point of view, fortunate not to be an experiencer, because I don't know how I ever would have managed that. And I'm very grateful to people like you who are talking about it and are in control. That I appreciate, and it's enriched my life and knowledge tremendously. Also, it means that you, as well as I think everybody else now, knows we've got to get ahead and solve this problem, and stop getting people, put it right way, getting the ETs out of our heads, or at least controlling when they're in our heads, and making it something that's voluntary, not obligatory. And there, Michael,
I have a problem with being, with humanity, with anybody being forced to anything against their will. It's just contrary to my nature, obviously, to most people's, but my sense of justice is a little bit on overdrive, as a lot of people that attest to at times here.
But
no, listen, we've worked as a society to build a country, Canada and the United States, and Britain and a bunch of others, where you don't mess with people, and the rules are set out, and everybody except the criminal few follow them, and even they're under control. That's the rules we need, although we're not in a position to enforce them.
Yeah.
with the ETs who are messing with us.
Yeah.
I take this as a social control issue, and we're not in control. That's a problem.
That's what Lou Elizondo was talking about, on how he wants the government's their responsibility. It's just on the national security aspects to establish those parameters of where, as you know, to do their job as the federal government to protect the United States and its citizens. And then anything beyond that, he wants the government and the military out of it and leave it into the hands of academia and civilians and theologians, just the general population, to interface on the civilian and aspects of this, if there is any communication, and not leave it to the government. Their only place is to protect where they can, and then stay out of it from there. Is the way Lou states it.
To give you an idea, this is the person who I turn myself into. I put on a filter and I look like a little kid again.
Oh my goodness.
And by doing this, when I'm going through it and I see myself looking back into the eyes and looking back at myself and I'm telling the story, that's where the emotion and everything gets out of my control and my ability, because I'm seeing myself as the kid who went through this stuff. Granted, it doesn't exactly look like me back then, but it's still me. And it just makes it that much more throwing back in time, and not just a memory in the back of my mind, but it's something that I'm going through and re-talking about like it's something that happened recently, not something that happened 45 years ago.
That's a new experience for me too. I've never seen that kind of filter in use. So I'm learning a lot today. That's amazing. I'm impressed. And
there's all different kinds of stuff. I see the smile on Greg's face. So if I wanted to go ahead, say for instance, where is that at? Where did I put it? I've got a pickle, so I can be the pickle guy. You can do all different kinds of stuff. You can make yourself be a clown. You can make yourself be an alien hybrid or something to a degree, or you can just take your eyes and make it look like, you're reptilian. Which I've seen a bunch of different videos where someone's eyes, they blink their eyes and then they go black and they blink them again and it comes back to a degree. They're just using tricks like this. But for me, it's just, part of having a fun time.
You're about 20 years ahead of me on social media. That's incredible. Yeah, I see that. Thank you.
Yeah. So I thought I'd get a smile out of you on that one. It's just something that kind of, makes everything fun, but it also shows we're serious about not being serious, because if you take too much of a clinical and really dry and drone and talk about things from a very serious kind of an aspect, some people will respond to it. But if you have something that's light and fun and engaging and you can laugh at it versus crying with it, because I've been able to handle this, for instance, with the emotions and everything going through the memories I have going back to it. But that's who I am today. So my mom right now, she's back in Illinois. She's in the hospital, about to go through hospice care when she leaves the hospital, and she's in the last stages of her life. And I had the virus a year and a half ago. It spiked my immune system, and I'm on these horrible medications called methotrexate, high doses of prednisone, to stop my immune system from destroying the small blood vessels in my body. Because of it, I can't get on a plane. I can't fly there and go and visit her. I'd have to drive halfway across the country to get to Illinois to see her, which there's not going to be enough time to get there. So it's kind of like, Mom, I'm not going to be able to come and see you beforehand, and I'm probably not going to be able to make it to your funeral. And she said, don't worry about it, Tom. I won't be able to make it to your funeral either. So we're even.
I'm sort of overwhelmed by how hard this must be for you. Is it still going on, by the way? No,
it isn't. Not to my knowledge.
No. Okay. That's
amazing. Yeah. And if it is what it is, and there's nothing that's there. I've someone asked a question. Have you heard about the contact initiatives that are out there with CE5 and other things like that? What's your thought on those things?
Oh, very simple. I even put this is in the book, in the bad part, in the bad side. There are two people, Sarah Seeger and Seth Shostak, who are both astronomers. And they're both SETI people, because that's their trade. They like big disks, and they like to listen to signals from outer space, to talk to aliens or to communicate with aliens. But they both have publicly ridiculed the UFO phenomenon. and I call them ignorant professionals in my book. And that's in the bad part of the lies part. They just don't know what the is going on, put it plainly. They've never paid attention to it. They've denigrated it by failing to look at the evidence, because that upsets their professional comfort and increases their anxiety. And psychologists know all about that. It's called cognitive dissonance. When you are faced with some unpleasant fact that you can dismiss with an alternative specious explanation, you get that fact out of your mind by adopting the alternative specious explanation. What's the alternative specious explanation for the UFO evidence? We're all crazy. We're believers. We're enthusiasts. We're people who can't be taken seriously because we have no credibility. And therefore, there's no reason to pay attention to us collectively. This is a common reaction, not so common now. I think we've reached the tipping point. But up until, say, May of 2021, this was an acceptable and available reason for not paying attention to either the UFO or the ET evidence, whichever you care to look at, or both. And people like Shostak and Seeger adopted this, went public with it, wrote books about it, and it is their turn to be dismissed, put it that way. I've done so.
Those of us that do ancient history, alternative history research, we face a lot of the same challenges where as soon as we start bringing up anything that involves the possibility of there being advanced ancient civilizations or some factions within those, mainstream academia constantly flips out, oh, you believe in aliens in Atlantis, so therefore everything you say is null and invalid. And even professional academics that are even tenured, if they even follow some of us on Twitter, so to speak, then they get accused of being completely discredited if they even follow us. So they have to be careful on some of them who even communicate with us openly, because there's such a stigma to it. And that's their argument, is that, oh, you must believe in aliens and Atlantis, so therefore everything you say is completely debased and invalid. That's their illogical argument with that.
Well, I totally sympathize. I'm completely sympathetic.
Well,
I'm glad
some of us don't give a damn, and we put forth the evidence anyway that we advance. They can't refute what's literally carved in stone. And many of us, like me, that's an engineer, we can tell what was made by power tools, what was made by hand tools. You can't refute that. When the tolerance is 0.02 thousandths of an inch, you didn't create that by hand. So there are some things they can't refute. So they just gloss over and ignore it and go back to the default answer of, well, you believe in aliens in Atlantis, so therefore nothing you say is credible. But well, that's changing too.
Well, that is changing. Tom sent me something just a couple of days ago along those lines. It was a visualization of something in the ocean. Where was it?
It's off the to the west of the Cocos Islands, which is in the Indian Ocean, the eastern part of it. Mm-hmm. And it's a radar scan that's of something about 1,460 feet or 1,560 feet below the surface of the land, but it's on a ridge that if the ocean was there, it would have been exposed at that particular time. And there's like giant characters that are carved out of the ground that they're equidistantly spaced, going across and in vertical space, almost like you're looking like giant ancient writing that could potentially be there. And what's interesting about it is each one of these characters is like 300 feet in size. So it's meant to be something large that can be seen from the air, but it's something that would have been, exposed maybe 12,000, 24,000, 50, 60,000 years ago, depending on the different cycles that were going on and how much of the earth was, how much of the Earth's water was locked up in ice. And what's really interesting about it is that the location where it's at, it specifically aligns with the North Pole and South Pole as they're going through, the magnetic ones are going through the magnetic transition as they are. It's pretty much right on the spot where the poles are going to meet.
Well, you told me all that, and my comment was, I don't know anything about this.
Yeah.
But you, obviously, ancient aliens people do. And so they're in a position to talk about it. And where my background is the empirical background of what you might call modern ufology. not the ancient alien stuff. So I would, as a professional, would have to say, I don't know. But it's of interest to people who are interested in it and who also know more about it. And that's where I have to leave something like that, because I'm, to put it plainly, not qualified to talk about it.
Right.
But
On personal level or academic, either one. If you're
Either one.
interested in learning more, there are many of us on Twitter that have a team that specialize in this type of research, and there are a lot of very high-profile names involved. Some of them that are on the peripherals of this as well. So it's something that we definitely can stay in contact on. But
there we go again. How many hours in the day are there for me?
it just depends on what your interest is what I'm saying.
Okay, anyway, that's interesting, and I thank you for that. And you can be interested in a lot of things without pursuing them. You have them available to read, and that's a good point.
I have to, I've got traumatic brain injury, and I overclock my head a lot, and then I have to rest for a day or two and then start back in again. So I have to pick and choose what I spend my time on.
Right.
Right.
So, sorry about that. Yeah.
Quick question for you from Linda Thompson. She's always got the hardest questions here. Hey, Dr. Don, have you been contacted by the current UAP task force in connection with their current research?
Which UAP task force? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what task force she means.
So there's a UAPTF task force that was put together as part of the Pentagon for doing research.
No,
yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Really not. No.
Okay. Well, you're just being honest with us, and it's good to know, because people are going to be asking about a bunch of different things just because you have such a huge pedigree of experience and have worked with and met with people of different areas. So it's still very interesting.
It's unlikely I will be. Here's why. I wrote a book published in 2013. I've got another one coming out in 2022. But that's what academics do. And I'm a retired academic, a scribbler, and I enjoy the writing and think I've done a decent job. And I was a friend of Bud Hopkins, Leslie Kane as well. But I'm not, and David Jacobs for that, but I'm not an active researcher in the sense that people in the Montreal area don't come to me with their stories.
Yeah.
I'm known to the media in Montreal about this.
Yes.
But I'm not a person who is what you might call dealing professionally as a clinician with people who have these experiences, or even trying to help many of them. There's a UFO community in Montreal. I'm a part of that, but it's very amateur. It's a matter of interest, not of professional focus, put it that way. I think that's true of a lot of UFO communities as well. Yeah.
It's hard to find people, and the thing is, because it had been given this stigma that, of, again, the tinfoil hats, which actually do have a purpose.
Yes, that's true.
But the tinfoil hats and the tinfoil wearing crowd, because there's been a lot of, from the way I see, there's a lot of tales and stories that are just way the hell out there, about the secret space ports and portals that we have that open can transport us from here to Mars and back. And we have all these, different things that are out there. And it's like a lot of it is really sounds like a matter of science fiction to a degree, just because there's nothing besides a person or so talking about it. There's nothing to verify it or anything. And it's almost, some of the stuff sounds like it's coming from a psyop that's going on to take these wacky things and inject it into it to make us all sound like we're all a bunch of crazy kooks. I
get it. You're right. I understand that. That's disinformation. We understand about disinformation. It makes cognitive dissonance easier. If this crazy story is true, then the rest of it must be nonsense. I mean, if the crazy story is out there, the rest of it, like it, must be nonsense. And I agree with that. The problem is, it's not all nonsense. And it's not nonsense. I know it's not nonsense. And the boundary is changing. It's changed rapidly. Now, UFOs, UAPs are real. People know that. They haven't bought into the rest of it yet. They haven't bought in to your experiences as something that we all have to deal with.
Yeah.
And they haven't bought into what, as a community or as a society, are we going to do about it? That dialogue, that conversation hasn't started yet. I think it's about to, but it's not there yet.
Right. I guess go ahead, Greg.
Thank you. I'll say this every day. I think it's our God-given right to know this information. It's a God-given right for us to know if we have brothers or sisters or cousins or whatever you want to call it out there in the universe, to get in touch with. And it's a God-given right that I think that was taken away from us. And that to me is like the worst part of all this behind the scenes and keeping it from us deal. And it's sad to say, and I would like to hear their excuse if it ever does come out. Why the heck would they do that?
Well, I think they do it because they're afraid of it. I'm serious. When it first happened, and again, this is not news. This is not me. This is on the record, and I've cited the record in my book. The U.S. government wrote a memo. The CIA wrote a memo saying this stuff is dangerous, not because of the aliens, but because people seeing UFOs might confuse them with Russian bombers, or we might get oversaturated with UFO reports and miss the bombers coming through. Remember, in those days, it wasn't just radar. It was people looking through binoculars also. At the air, there were basically watchtowers where people stood looking for Russian bombers approaching the United States, as well as they might get under radar cover. So they had to be both a ground observer corps and the radar installations. And UFOs were seen, the people reporting UFOs were seen as a threat to that defense system back in the 40s and 50s. And that's why the government actively debunked UFOs, along with people like Philip Klass and Donald Menzel, who I'm sure you've heard of. These were prominent, Philip Klass, the Aviation Week editor, Donald Menzel, a leading physicist, both of whom wrote books debunking, making fun of, ridiculing the people who took this seriously. Yeah. And they published scores of books on the subject, one after the other. It's nonsense. Don't pay attention. And
at the same time, they were trying to covet the technology that they were discovering.
Yes.
And wanted to be the first to reverse engineer it and capitalize on it and monopolize on it, basically, without anyone's knowledge beforehand, right, before they ever got it turnkey out into production.
Right.
Right. And as you all know, I'm sure, the people who brought out that information early on, like Bob Lazar, were quite seriously criticized for having done so. And
set on fire and tarred and feathered.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, that's part of the history of this. I only cover a little of it, not the whole. And other people cover it well. People have written about this for decades, and many of them more scholarly than me. Jerry Clark, Michael Swords, they put together tremendous books with lots of help. And this stuff has been going on. The books have been written for many, many years. I'm not the first, goodness knows. And by no means, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think like you were saying about tenure, being protected with that, I think from what you're saying, there's a lot of academics out there that have been sitting on volumes of information that are relevant, but they've been afraid to advance before now. And now that they're seeing that the stigma is reversing, that maybe a lot more of these will start coming forward with that aren't tenured, that do have highly credible, relevant information to the conversation.
I hope you're right. I think you might be. That's true. The other thing I don't know, and this is something that I doubt if even Tom knows, how many people have undergone the abduction experience. I have no clue. I don't know how many. I don't know what percentage of humans have undergone this. I don't know shall we get into hybrids or we leave that alone? I mean, that's another.
Oh, we can get into it, because if you want to look at 3 hybrids, you're looking at 3 are on the bottom of the stage, and if you look at your reflection, you've got a 4th one here, and plus everyone in 27 people, if you want to call it, who are watching a broadcast right now. It comes down to our ancient story talks about the creation of humanity.
Okay, you're going back to the beginning. Okay,
yeah,
right. I'll take that, but that doesn't deal with the current phenomenon, and I've dealt with that. People, and I deal with it briefly in the book. Women who claim to have been abducted, inseminated on board, impregnated, brought back, 1 in 50, that's amazing, brought back to the UFO, delivered of their fetus, the fetus being raised on board, and again, I point this out in the book, in a jar, just like in Brave New World, the dystopian novel published by Aldous Huxley in 1932, and became a part of a hybrid community of human beings / aliens from somewhere or other, whose main difference between us and them is they can communicate telepathically. and they do so. And that is a game changer for humanity. It's all right talking to you guys. I enjoy it. But imagine how the world would be if we were all capable of communicating with each other telepathically with varying degrees of influence. And this is the kind of thing that some of you have experienced. I have not, thank goodness. And I worry about the implications of that for human society and our interactions with ETs. But that's off the deep end of where I've gone in the book. And I think it's about what you might call the deep end of any conversation humans can have about this. I hope they're talking about it in the U.S. federal cabinet, but I doubt it. Anyway,
Even going back to the elongated skulls with the research they do in antiquity, they had 25 to 50% more brain volume than the average human. And they talked that they may have had abilities of telepathy, because all throughout ancient history, the people, the elongated skulls were represented as the rulers and the priest classes all throughout history on every continent.
Yeah.
And those that did the head binding, they wanted to emulate that. Obviously, they were wanting to emulate it for a reason,
Right.
because they had abilities that were beyond the normal persons throughout history and every culture.
I'd love to read about that.
Yeah.
Can you find a source and tell me about it?
Yeah, I can even do something better. Brian Forrester is a researcher who's been heavily going and researching this
you don't have to
all
write
around the world, in down in Peru, over in Europe, in different areas. And basically they found that the skull structure itself is about 50% denser than the human skull. The point of where the spine actually balances on the back of the skull is in a different location,
about an inch back.
And they also are missing the sagittarian suture that kind of goes up. That's a sign that every particular human has. They've got some of the skulls where they're saying, oh, this is a child, but they're looking at the teeth inside the mouth. Those teeth are the full-grown, if you want to call it, fully grown teeth of an adult.
Alien
So
Crimea skeleton system. So
How come these guys and girls aren't in charge? No.
They were basically, there are some bloodline, there are descendants of them that have partial DNA that they found of what they call the Paracas. And Brian Forrester has 2 books on them, on the elongated skulls, and for his research. And he supposedly has DNA published in his 2nd book now that I haven't bought yet, but I'm going to.
This has been incredibly informative for me. This has been a great seminar. I'm learning a heck of a lot I didn't know 2 hours ago. This is
Well, you
I'm
came to the
retired,
right spot then.
so
We've got a lot of
you can
information
call me
here.
at any time, 24/7, to talk about any of this. I'd be glad to have conversations with you on any aspect you want to hear. And my friend that's in ancient history criticisms in the chat, he's the guy who brought me into Twitter a couple of years ago. They have an entire team that have been researching ancient history on the megaliths and things for several years now, where they found that the protrusions on the megaliths are universal across about 80 to 90% of all the megaliths across the planet. So that is the most prolific hallmark across the globe that shows they were all interrelated with each other.
Right.
Whether you want to argue they were advanced or primitive or not, they all had these protrusions across the planet.
And the protrusions, what's big about it, Rob, the protrusions, what's big about it is, for many, it looks like it's representing some kind of an ancient language or communication system, because of the patterns, the shapes of the rocks, how they go across, and there's multiple layers of it, almost like multiple sentences in a structure that's kind of there. And these are the guys that have been going to try and figure out and put the pieces together on it.
Yeah, it conveys information, but this is the research partly that we do. And Ancient History Criticisms, he's got a YouTube channel that's filled with YouTube videos that he's done on this topic.
While we're talking about that, here are some of the symbols I got a long time ago from Bud, collected from people who've had UFO experiences. I'm not going to show them all to you, but I just got this put away. And
what you do want to share, I can guarantee you that we have comprehensive catalogs among our research team of almost every hallmark on the planet. And I'm not joking on that. If you've got a symbol, and Andrew and I have the same type memory, if we've ever seen it before, we can tell you where we've seen it before and take you right to it.
My gosh. Well, that would be going on much further than I've ever gone with this.
That's what we do.
It's fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I've gotten into something That's going to take me
I
8
think you're going
hours
to be like a kid in a candy store.
next 2 weeks or next 10 years. Anyway, we'll see. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I think you'll be pleasantly surprised what we are able to share with you.
Well, I hope you'll put this out literally in some published form.
Yeah.
And let me know about what's already been published.
Absolutely.
And keep on doing it. Yeah.
Now, I think we've kind of talked about, we're getting towards the end of your book and getting and towards the end of the broadcast, but there's a couple things you had at the end that were kind of interesting. One you had called the political challenge. What do you see on that particular aspect of it? What is the political challenge of trying to move forward with this?
Taking it seriously, having our governments, the people who are in charge, taking this seriously. The other problem we have, regardless of ETs or UFOs, is organizing the human species not to, how shall I put it, threaten each other continually with mutual annihilation and develop, and this is a political challenge we'd have even if there were, nobody's ever heard of ETs. How do we manage, I'm a, how shall I put it, a nationalist in this. I live in Canada, I'm a dual national. I appreciate the virtues of, let's put it plainly, Anglo-Saxon civilization, which has evolved through centuries of conflict and struggle and strife. And it's not perfect, but it's developed constitutions and laws and the respect for the rule of law that everyone has to obey. It's not perfect, nobody does it perfectly, but we've got to develop something equally universal and equally under control for the entire species. That's very hard. It's not easy to do, and we're not there yet, put it plainly. That's a challenge I see. And I'm sorry, I'm prejudiced about where we start, but it's a very strong feeling that we better get there.
Yeah, we've got to come together as a civilization for once in civilization's history to try and work together so we don't perish separately, you know, so to speak, potentially. Because we don't know, like your book, like your outline says, we don't know their intentions yet. They haven't made that known.
That's right.
And the other thing I see from the political challenge is just that they're trying to keep as much of this locked up because they want the technology for the war machine. They're afraid that if someone else gets it before us, that they're going to go ahead and use that for something to go ahead and have dominance over the rest of the planet. But the reality is, I don't think, in my perspective, is what it could be, that they're ready. The ET intelligence that is here would allow that kind of stuff to happen.
Well, you know, the ET intelligence that's here has already shut down American nuclear facilities, just to let us know that it can happen.
Yeah.
What they've done on the other side of the Iron Curtain, as it used to be, I don't know, but I've heard stories.
Russia attested to that as well.
Yeah.
When they were sharing the first 5 years after the Iron Curtain fell, they were sharing a bunch of their UFO data with us, and they had told where they had theirs were turned on for 7 minutes, and they couldn't shut them off.
Yeah. So
they decided that they were in launch sequence, and everything they did, they could not stop it, and then it just switched back off instantaneously again. So they were terrified.
So but it took us. They just turned ours off and said, "Okay, you can't have them," and that taught us the lesson. But the Russians, they needed a stronger way to go ahead and say, "Don't screw around with this," because we can turn these things on and stop them if we want.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, there we go. We've got some things to work out amongst other human beings yet, and they're not worked out. There's a goodness knows. And in the meantime, we're being treated as an inferior species.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we're not at the look how the humanity treats every other earthling and even the earth, because we think we're at the top of the totem pole. But the reality is, guess what? We're not. And if that's the reality, we have to look at humanity and what we've been doing and saying, well, are these things that bad for what they're doing to us and everything, considering everything that humanity does to everything else?
Fair point. Can't argue.
Yeah. And we tend to forget in the conversation about the nuclear weapons that they're also interested in our nuclear, aircraft carriers and submarines, and also, so maybe it is something beyond, weapons, and it just seems to be that way.
It seems that they're telegraphing an interest that, evidently they've been here a while. They haven't interfered with us killing each other. So at what point, to look at this as a telegraph perspective, what are their intentions? What are they telegraphing? As if you would look at this from a military perspective, of advanced scouts to predict where their interests lay. If they are interested in not allowing the rest of the planet, because this is their home too, and they don't want it destroyed, they don't care if we kill each other. They just don't want us to kill everything else on the planet. At what point would they intervene, and how much? You know, that's a very broad and open question that we have to try and figure out. Because obviously they're not opening lines of communication with us yet, which clearly, given how they were able to ascertain the cap point on the Nimitz encounter, they're able to discern whatever information they want ahead of time from us. So they well know our language and how to interpret our communications. So they're just choosing to not overtly communicate as far as we know at this point.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been fascinating, and I've learned more than I've said, put it that way.
Wait till you get on Twitter and you get actually talk to Alex and, ask her questions, because think about it. If you sit there and have a question, be like, I wonder this, and that, all you have to do is just click a button, ask a question. And, she's good with responses too, which is, really nice. A lot of these people are great with responses. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Okay. Yeah. Well, this has been, thank you for inviting me. First of all,
absolutely. I was glad I was able to track you down, but I figured, you know what? I bet you I could find a way that I could freaking get in contact with you and actually talk to you. And I was able to do the magic that I do, and I was able to connect. And I'm glad we were able to do that, and to find a time that we could bring you out here and talk to you about this important topic.
Well, this has been terrific fun. It's obviously been good for me. I hope it's been enjoyable for you.
Tremendously.
And yes, great for expanding my world, as all of my world has expanded in the last year and a half on the equivalent of Zoom. It's just another channel for meeting people, which has now come into general use and will never go away. I think this is terrific.
Absolutely. I'd like to have you back anytime you're interested. We do this 2-3 times a week. So.
Oh boy, I still got work. I literally work.
Your prerogative.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Great time to be alive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for. I appreciate you being here, Don, and everything. I guess it's about time that you need to go, because we've been on here going for about an hour and 57 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, I'll check out, and I thank you all, and I'm sure we'll be in touch, because you made it clear there's a lot for me to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one last question for you.
Sure.
Do you know the statistics? If somebody is hypnotized, what the probability of them, what they're advancing, is what they believe is the truth? What is the percentage rate? I mean, what I've heard is people can't consciously lie under hypnotism. They may be able to. They will tell what they believe is the truth, but they can't selectively tell a lie actively under hypnotism, I think, is what I've read in the psychology books. And I know that's not your forte, but I just wondered if you might have some kind of a general knowledge on that statistic.
Unfortunately, you can be persuaded to say things under hypnosis that are suggested by the hypnotist. So you have to have an ethical hypnotist who's doing his or her job right. And people have gotten into trouble. There was a great deal of trouble back in the 80s, I think, over
with multiple personality disorders.
That, as well as abuse. People were constantly being reminded of abuse that didn't happen. And this is a well-documented, unfortunate event, and it's open season for skeptics, because hypnotherapy is a very difficult tool. Hypnosis is a difficult tool.
Yeah,
it's perfect. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate you coming out. You have a great evening, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Okay, very good. Thanks. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Night.
No, we're not going yet, guys. We're still here.
Just saying right there.
Yeah, let's go ahead and just I'll make myself a little bit smaller. That's okay. That's fine where it is. It's been one heck of a show so far tonight. I mean, Don is truly an amazing person, and I appreciate the perspective of what he brought in. What do you think, Rob?
I think he's an amazing person. That he's very humble, but he's a intellectual powerhouse. But yeah, it's refreshing to see somebody come in with that kind of humility and be able to state where he isn't an expert, to stay in his lane. I mean, that's a highly admirable, that he doesn't that he's able to state where he's an expert and is not afraid to state where he's not. That I admire tremendously, in addition to his wealth of knowledge.
Absolutely. How about you, Greg?
I totally agree. I found that to be comforting as well. I heard him say that a couple of times to where he didn't know necessarily or anything. So instead of like spreading false information, he just simply stated, and that is so cool because it takes the emotion out of it and it helps us keep on the right path. And he's just an amazing person, and it's going to be great to just have him around also, just as another like Rob said, just another great asset to the game.
Right, someone we can collaborate with in the future and talk with about what he's working on and where he's kind of going, and what are the next steps of things that he's kind of going towards, because he's truly a person who's been involved in a lot of different things throughout the years. And opening up this communication with him and getting him there, it's just, I look at this as kind of like a first step, if you want to call it, going down that path.
He seemed pleased.
Yeah.
I think he's pleasantly enjoying the new networking possibilities. I think it was a little overwhelming for him, but given the nature of some of his personal losses that Thomas and I know of from the last year and things, I could understand where staying busy would be healthy for him, and having him find new avenues of appreciation of people that can appreciate him, not just for what he knows, but for who he is as well. I think that would be, from a personal standpoint, I've gone through that myself. I know what the value of that is when you get cut off from everything you ever knew and have to reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
Having a community of people like yourselves to interact with is invaluable in those instances.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing before we kind of close out the night here, there are a couple things that are happening in the news coming up on Monday. First off, we have Jeremy Corbell, who was seen, he did a selfie right outside of CNN studios. So he was going in for some kind of interview. Next on his Twitter, or later that night, he had another picture of himself posted with George Knapp. So usually Knapp and Corbell are definitely involved with something. There's more news coming out from that perspective. We've heard talk about something coming out from Congress as well, that they're getting ready to move forward on something. And then we also there's a millionaire who's been going and talking about a study that they've been working on, or are going to be working on a new scientific, if you want to call it, research study into the phenomenon, where we've had a lot of stuff that's been done under the guise of national security and from the federal government. But now we actually have people who are actually going out and, if you want to call it, going and doing the research and funding it. So now we've got the super billionaires out there, besides Bigelow, who's actually really interested in the phenomena. And now we've got a way to actually go ahead and start doing the research that we need to have.
Yep, amen. And it's separate from any kind of government, entity or anything like that. It's completely, hopefully, and it stays that way, because but that's definitely great to hear. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I want to thank everyone in the audience for coming out tonight. Just reaching out. Let's see. We got the 5D. Let's go to the end. Let's to kind of follow the way that someone else had done this. Go in the chat. 5D Raver, thanks for showing up tonight. Linda Thompson, absolutely great having you here tonight. Thank you could be here for a part of this conversation. Ethereal Aura, thank you for being here. You've had some great questions. He's bringing up the Galileo Project, is the name of that one. It's funded by several wealthy people interested in the topic. So rather than just someone like Jeff Bezos, who's looking at to go ahead and capitalize on space and turn it away to make more money, we've got some people that are actually going and, trying to advance the topics. Robin Hood 1966. Wait a minute. That's you, Rob. Great for being in the chat. Great troll. Great having you here this evening. Wouldn't be the same without you. Who else do I got? I already brought up the 5D Raver. Beverly Holmes. Again, 100% thanks to us guys for what we're doing. And we want to say thank you to Beverly and everyone else for coming out to the show and sharing this and trying to make it happen for us. Robert Page, you got to run. We're going to be running soon. But again, thanks for coming on out. We really appreciate you being here. Alina Lonanu, I'll get your name eventually. Thanks for the stars. We give you the stars back and everything. We got X1. Also, there's Nikki, Thomas Fessler. These beings don't care as much about the planet as much as they do about the genetics it produces, and particularly the human genome. Possibly, they're the gardeners of the planet to a degree, is what they've been called out as. As time moves on, we'll see what goes on with that. Power Falcon, you've had a lot of different, I just saw you in here somewhere. You've had a lot of different questions and things coming up. You're kind of looking at it from a different perspective. Everyone has a different perspective to see things. And hopefully as time goes on and we can share some more information with you, your ability to see things will also open up and be able to see it from a way of acceptance versus trying to look at it in a way that how can it not be versus how can it be? And that's kind of just a switch people need to go through over time. Bob Gray, class 1 telephone, I guess. Yeah, I've got one of those. I actually don't have a, what do you call it? A wired one anymore, but yeah, still got one of those to a degree. Who else do I have here? That's about it. So I want to say thank you to everybody for coming out. Let me start up the music. We'll just keep the loop there and everything and go for a period of time. Actually, I could do the whole thing. There's a better one. It's the whole freaking song. So we've had a great time. We've talked to Dr. Donderi. He's, gave us a really cool insight on his current books, some of his information. Like Greg and Robert saying, it's great to see someone who's talking about things. But more importantly, they're actually saying, well, that's not an area I'm not an expert in. So I really can't give you my point on it, which takes a lot for people to go ahead and say. It's really impressive on his part. Thanks to Linda. We're going to link you up with Dr. Don. We're going to get him into the Twitter crowd, get him introduced to people like Alex Dietrichs, and hopefully maybe make it someone that she'll follow and they'll build the communication between the two, because that's what it's all about. It's about collaboration, communication, and having a good time when we're going through it. So I want to say thanks to everybody for coming out tonight. We really appreciate you being here. Anything from you, Rob? Last words?
I just appreciate all of you being here, and especially our guest for tonight. It was tremendous. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that, man.
And
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say I am so grateful for you, Thomas, to have me on, and Rob, I'm so grateful just to be in your company. Period, man. And thank you so much. And I love these
conversations. Greg.
I love these conversations. Yeah, and
you've got
it's
some really
great.
good, very good instincts and insights. To listen
Thank
to.
you.
So
Thank you.
your perspective is valuable to me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to thank Rob and Greg and, of course, Don for being here tonight, everyone in the chat room, because it wouldn't be the same. Bob Gray, thanks for the prayers for my mom. It's his is in the hospice as well. I understand where you're coming from, Bob. It's not an easy time, but at least my mom's got the idea. Well, I can't make it to her funeral, and she can't make it to mine. So, hey, we're even. That takes a sense of humor on that. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Take care, everybody. Have a great evening. See ya.
Good night.